The ground shook as the beast roared, its jaws wide enough to crush a battle tank, yet the girl stood still, barefoot on stone that burned from the inside. Her silver eyes locked onto the creature with no fear, no mercy. She didn't move until the wind turned cold and the sun died behind the black clouds. Then she stepped forward, her hand glowing with heat and blood, and whispered the words that always followed death on her world. "You're not the first, you won't be the last." The air smelled like smoke and metal. The ground cracked with heat as the twin suns rose from behind the jagged mountains. The sky above was never blue, only red and black with trails of ash floating like snow. She woke before the first quake hit, her ears trained to catch the trembling. Deep beneath the crust, by the time the cave roof shook, she was already outside. Standing on the cliff's edge, her hair tied with bone string, her skin marked by fire scars she never tried to hide. She was called Shari by the ones who feared her, the Deathburn by the ones who worshipped her, but she had no name for herself. Only the silence of survival, only the song of storms that sang through her blood. Today was the 4th day of blood heat, the time when the monsters beneath the surface came out to feed, and she welcomed it. She had set no traps, laid no bait. She simply stood there with her blade made from the fang of a sky serpent and waited. A low rumble came from the far ridge. The earth cracked open and something massive climbed out. Its limbs twisted like molten trees, eyes glowing green with hunger. The beast roared, shaking the rocks. Birds with metal feathers fled into the sky. But she didn't move, didn't flinch. She had killed its kind before. It charged, fast and heavy, but she slid beneath its claws like water, slicing its leg and rolling through the blood as it howled. Another step, another cut. The dance of death repeated again and again until the beast slowed, confused, bleeding from places it couldn't reach. It tried one last desperate swing, but she was already behind it, and with one clean strike, she drove her blade into its throat. The monster fell, choking on its own breath, and she stood over it, watching its light fade around her. The land was quiet again, only the wind spoke. She dragged the beast's body to the edge of the cliff, letting its blood spill into the river. Below, a message to anything that watched from the trees or skies. She turned toward the black tower in the distance, the only structure older than war, where her people lived behind bone walls, watching her from the shadows. They never came close unless they needed a beast slain or a curse broken. She didn't mind. She liked the silence more than their praise. That night, as the fire cracked in her cave, the stars vanished behind sudden clouds. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke, fuel, and something else, something strange. She stepped out, following the trail across stone and ash, her feet bare but hardened like iron. In the valley below, something massive had crashed. Metal torn open like fruit, flames still rising. She crouched above the wreckage, watching as smoke twisted upward and sparks danced across broken panels. And then she saw movement inside the broken shell. A creature crawled out, coughing. Falling, rising again. He had no armor, no claws, no scales. His skin was soft, too soft. His face open and confused. Eyes bright like the moon's. He was human. She had only heard of them in whispers from broken soldiers and mad traders, beings from the far stars, creatures that lived on green worlds and drank clean water. She had never believed they were real, yet here he was, alone, wounded, and still. Breathing, she stayed in the shadows, watching, waiting for him to scream or beg or die. But he didn't. He stood up, looked around, wiped blood from his face, and smiled. It wasn't a mad smile or a fearful one. It was calm, like someone who had seen worse and survived it. She stepped down, slow and silent, her blade ready but not raised. He turned to her without fear, his eyes scanning her face, her marks, her scars, and then he spoke. "Nice place," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Bit rough, though." She blinked once, unsure if she had imagined his words. No one joked on her world. "Not here, not ever." He sat down on a rock, groaned as he touched his side, and looked up at her again. "You gonna kill me?" he asked, like it was a casual thing, like death meant nothing. She didn't answer. She simply stared. He took a breath, looked up at the burning sky and said, "Could use some water, though." The silence between them stretched like a blade. She had no idea what this human wanted, why he wasn't afraid, how he was even alive. But one thing was certain, he didn't belong here, and yet he wasn't dying, not yet, and in her heart, something strange began to stir, something she hadn't felt since she was a child. Curiosity. She turned her back to him, not as a threat, but as an invitation, if he could follow. Maybe he was worth the answer she had never found. Was she truly the strongest, or had the stars finally sent her an equal? The wind howled as she walked, and behind her, she heard his footsteps, slow but steady, still alive, still smiling, still human. The valley was quiet as dawn crept over the broken ridges, the red sunlight crawling slowly over the cracked bones of beasts that once ruled the skies. Shari walked ahead, her steps light but sure, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. The human followed close behind, breathing heavy but steady. He didn't ask where they were going. He didn't complain about the heat or the dust or the sharp rocks that tore at his boots. He just kept walking. That made her curious, but she didn't show it. They climbed down into the bone fields, a place where even her strongest hunters refused to step. The ground here remembered blood, and the wind carried whispers of the dead. Massive skeletons of sky beasts lay scattered across the land, their hollow skulls tilted toward the stars, as if they had died screaming at the sky. The human looked around, wide-eyed, his fingers brushing against a bone as tall as him. "Is this your graveyard?" he asked, voice low. Shari didn't answer, she just pointed forward. Deeper into the cursed land, he followed without hesitation. She led him to the heart of the field, to a place where a single black stone stood, half buried in dust, cracked from age and fury. "This is where warriors come to prove themselves," she said, her voice quiet but sharp. "If they survive, they are named by the storm. If they fail, the earth eats their bones." The human stepped closer to the stone, brushing dust off. A mark that looked like a claw wrapped in lightning. "What do I have to do?" he asked, not backing away, not blinking. She stared at him for a long time, then dropped a satchel of dried meat and a skin of bitter water beside him. "You stay here until night falls and the beasts come," she said. "You do not run. You do not cry. You fight or you die." He nodded, then sat beside the stone like it was nothing more than a campfire tale. Shari turned and walked away, but she didn't go far. She climbed a rock spire and watched from above, hidden in the shadows of a dead tree. Hours passed, the sun rose high, and the air thickened with heat, but the human didn't move. He chewed the dried meat slowly, drank a little water, and waited. When the first growl echoed across the valley, even the wind went silent. From the edge of the bones, a creature emerged, skin like stone, fangs long and curved, eyes burning with yellow fire. It stalked closer, muscles shifting under heavy armor like flesh, the kind that even her blade struggled to pierce. Still, the human stood, slowly pulling a small blade from his belt, Shari narrowed her eyes, wondering how long he would last. The beast charged, fast and loud, roaring as it leaped toward him. But the human rolled aside, barely missing the crushing weight of its claws. He stabbed at its side, once, twice, but the blade barely scratched. The beast turned, tail lashing out and knocking him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, breath gone, ribs likely broken, but he got up. Blood running from his mouth, Shari felt something twist in her chest. The beast charged again, jaws wide, ready to end him. But this time, the human waited, still as stone, at the last second. He ducked under its bite, drove his blade into the soft flesh under its jaw, and twisted. The beast screamed, thrashed, then fell, twitching in the dirt. The human stood over it, shoulders heaving, eyes dark and distant. Shari didn't move, not yet. Not until the second beast came, then the third, then a fourth crawling from beneath the bones, drawn by the scent of blood and battle. He didn't run, he didn't beg, he fought, wild and brutal, his blade dancing like fire, his fists smashing into bone and flesh. By the time the sun vanished and the sky turned purple, he was still standing, covered in blood, shaking, but alive. Shari climbed down from her perch and walked into the field, the bones cracking under her feet. He turned to her, face pale, arms trembling, and grinned. "I think I broke a rib," he said, laughing weakly. "Maybe two." She stared at him. This human who had survived what many of her people never could, and something inside her shifted. She reached into her belt pouch and pulled out a single shard of obsidian, shaped like a fang. "This is yours now," she said, placing it in his bloody hand. "The storm does not name cowards." He looked at it, then looked at her, that strange smile still on his face. "What does it name me?" he asked. She didn't answer, not yet. The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of fresh blood and old fear. She turned and began walking back toward the mountains. Behind her, the human followed, limping, but alive. He didn't speak again, and neither did she. But in her mind, one thought burned brighter than the twin suns above. He had passed the first test, and the next one would break him, or reveal what he truly was. Not prey, not visitor, not just a human, but something far more dangerous and equal. The sky darkened without warning, the sun swallowed by clouds so thick they looked like stone. The wind died in an instant, and every beast in the valley fell silent. Shari froze mid-step as the first tremor passed beneath her feet, a low growl, coming from the ground itself like the world was waking from a nightmare. The human, who walked just a few paces behind her, paused and looked up, his hand shielding his eyes. But there was no light left to block, only shadow and silence. She knew this feeling, this scent in the air, thick with iron and ash. The hunger storm was coming. It didn't bring rain or fire or ice. It brought the forgotten things, creatures buried deep under rock and bone. Drawn out by the cold silence and blood scent, Shari turned sharply, her eyes flashing as she grabbed the human's arm and pulled him toward a narrow path through the rocks. "We don't go to shelter," she said, her voice sharp like glass. "We go to the Hill of Teeth." He didn't ask questions, just followed, moving faster now. The wind returned, but it didn't whistle like before. It screamed, high and thin, like something dying far above the clouds. Dust rose from the ground, swirling in small circles, and in the distance something howled, not like an animal, not like a storm, but like both mixed into something worse. They reached the Hill of Teeth just as the first drop of black rain hit the ground. Not water, not oil, but something thicker, stickier, like the world was bleeding from the sky. The hill was a massive rock covered in broken spikes, the remains of an ancient creature's spine turned to stone. Shari climbed fast, her fingers knowing every crack, every ledge, and the human followed, slower but steady, halfway up. A claw burst from the earth below, long and slick, digging through the dust as a beast pulled itself from the ground, its mouth wide and full of teeth that turned in different directions. The human swore under his breath, his eyes locked onto the thing crawling behind them. "Keep climbing," Shari shouted, her voice cutting through the scream of the wind. They reached the top as 3 more beasts rose from the valley floor, their shapes twisted, limbs bending the wrong way, eyes glowing from mouths and chests. Shari drew her blade, the storm screaming around her, the rain burning wherever it touched her skin. The human crouched beside her, holding a broken spear he had carved from bone earlier that day, his face pale but his hands steady. The first beast reached the base of the hill and let out a roar that echoed like thunder trapped inside a cave. More beasts came, crawling like shadows through the black rain. Some had wings made of bone, some moved like smoke. All were hungry. Shari didn't speak. She just leaped from the top, landing on the back of the first creature with a roar of her own, her blade driving deep into its spine. It howled, bucked, and collapsed under her weight, but 3 more replaced it before the body hit the ground. The human threw his spear at one, hitting its eye, then grabbed a shard of stone and charged at another, slamming it into its side as it snapped its jaws toward his throat. They fought like wild things, back to back, the hill becoming a storm of teeth and screams and blood. Shari moved like flame, fast and angry, her blade dancing in the dark, cutting through flesh and bone. The human fought like thunder, sudden and violent, every strike meant to kill or die trying. The beasts didn't stop, not even when their own bodies piled up beneath them. They kept coming, called by something older than hunger, something deeper than rage. Shari began to slow, blood running down her arm, her breath shallow, her vision shaking. The human saw her stumble and roared, slamming his shoulder into a charging beast and throwing both of them down the slope, rolling through mud and blood and broken bones. He came back limping, his face covered in cuts, his shirt torn, but his eyes still burning. She looked at him, just for a second, and nodded. They would die if they stayed on the hill, but they wouldn't run either. So they jumped, together, diving into the sea of monsters, blades swinging, fists flying, voices screaming. The world became noise and fire and shadow, and then silence when Shari opened her eyes. She was lying on her back, the sky above her bright and calm, the storm gone like it had never existed. The hill of teeth stood behind them, covered in bodies, most of them twisted and still, some slowly dissolving into dust. She turned her head and saw him lying beside her, breathing hard, eyes closed. She reached over and touched his shoulder, his skin warm and wet with blood that smelled both human and not. His eyes opened slowly, a small smile on his lips. "We lived," he whispered. She stared at him, not understanding how or why, but knowing one thing for sure. He had stood with her when even the strongest would have fled. He had bled with her, fought with her, nearly died with her, and still, he smiled. The storm was over. But something else had begun. Not friendship, not trust, not yet, but something far more dangerous, respect. And in the world of fire and beasts, that meant everything. The village fires burned low that night, not because of wind or ash, but because the elders had spoken, their voices heavy with fear and tradition. They had seen the human bleed with the storm, and still live. They had seen him fight beside the death burn and not fall. Shari stood before them with blood still fresh on her blade, her body shaking not from weakness, but from the truth she could not speak aloud. He was not like the others, not like the weaklings from other stars who cried when the wind screamed. He had faced the hunger storm and survived, and now the old laws demanded an answer. A trial meant for only one, the Forbidden's trial. She had taken it when she was barely more than a child. It had changed her, broken her, built her again from fire and pain. Now the elders whispered, if he truly was her equal, he must walk the same path. The human stood near the edge of the fire circle, his arms folded, face still bruised from the last battle. But his eyes were clear. He didn't flinch when the eldest pointed at him. He walks the night cave, the elder said, voice rough like sand and bone. Or he leaves and never returns. Shari stepped forward, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. He doesn't know what waits inside, she said. But the human raised a hand. I don't need to, he said, looking at her. If you faced it, so will I. That made the others murmur. Even Shari's heart trembled at those words. They gave him a single torch made of bone and sap, and nothing else. No weapons, no food, no water. Just his will. The cave mouth opened like a wound in the earth, wide and wet with cold air. The walls, slick with old blood and memories. Shari watched as he stepped inside, his torch lighting the path with a flickering glow. Then he vanished into the dark. No one spoke, no one moved, not even her, because what waited inside was not a beast, not a storm, not even a weapon. It was the self, twisted and torn apart. Inside the cave, the human walked slowly, every step echoing like a scream. The ground soft and damp, breathing beneath his boots like skin. The torch hissed as it touched the air, casting strange shapes on the walls. He heard whispers, soft and slow, voices he didn't recognize at first. Then he froze. One voice was his mother's, another was his brother's. Then came the sound of his own voice, screaming, begging, breaking. The tunnel narrowed, the air grew thick, and the walls closed in like a throat ready to swallow. He kept walking, even as fear crawled under his skin, even as he felt hands brush his back with fingers made of nothing. A door appeared ahead, made of light and smoke, and he stepped through. Suddenly, he was back on Earth, or something like it. The sky blue, the wind warm, people walking past him. Without faces, a woman stood in front of him, holding a child with silver eyes and blood on her lips. You left us, she said, voice hollow. He shook his head, reached out, but she melted into dust and everything turned black. He fell to his knees. The ground hard now, burning his skin. Flames rose around him, laughter echoed from above, twisted and cruel. Then he heard Shari's voice, not real, but cold and sharp. You think you belong here, it said. You think survival makes you worthy. He looked up and saw her standing on a throne made of skulls, her eyes glowing, her face blank. You are soft, the echo said. You are nothing. He screamed and stood, flames licking his arms, pain dancing through his veins. I am not nothing, he shouted. I am human. The fire swallowed him. And then silence returned. When he opened his eyes again, he was lying on cold stone. Breath shallow, torch gone, light gone, only darkness remained. He sat up, groaning, every part of him aching, but his mind sharper than ever. He had seen fear, faced his past, walked through his own pain, and still stood. He rose and walked forward, blind, hand against the wall, feeling each heartbeat guide him like a drum. Then he saw it, a soft glow ahead, the end of the trial. He stepped into the open, the cave spitting him out like a breath held too long. The crowd outside gasped as he stumbled into the firelight, bloody, dirty, shaking, but alive. Shari rushed forward, grabbing his arm before he collapsed. He looked at her with tired eyes and said, "Your cave needs better lighting." She didn't laugh, but her grip tightened. The elders stepped back, whispers rising again, not of fear this time, but of something worse, change. He had survived the forbidden trial, something only one in a generation ever passed, and now the laws no longer knew what to do with him. The fire cracked louder, and the wind carried a new word across the stone: equal, and Shari felt it in her bones, in her blood, in the place where rage once lived. He had not only survived her world, he had become part of it, and something far worse was coming. Something no one had foreseen, because if he was her equal, then the world would soon ask them to choose a side, and together they were dangerous. More dangerous than the storm, more dangerous than the cave, more dangerous than death itself. The village was quiet again, but the silence was different now. It was heavy like smoke after a fire, thick with something unspoken, something hiding just beneath the surface. Shari walked through the bone-paved paths with the human behind her. Every eye watched them from behind broken stone walls. Every whisper stopped when they passed. They had survived the cave, they had survived the storm, but this was something else, something older, something colder. The elders sat in the council hall with faces carved from ash and time, their voices low, their words sharp. "This cannot go on," one said. "He is not of us." "He has walked the path," another replied, "and still he stands." "Then the path is broken," the first elder hissed, "and we are blind." Outside, the fire pits burned low and strange figures moved in the dark, too quiet, too slow, like snakes waiting to strike. Shari felt it first, the wrongness in the air, the tension in the stone beneath her feet, the way the wind refused to blow near the center of the village. The human felt it too, though he said nothing, his eyes scanning every shadow, every corner, as if the world itself had shifted sideways. They shared no words that night, but their silence was full of meaning. Something was coming, and they both knew it. That evening, a child ran to Shari with wide eyes and trembling hands. "They speak in secret," the child whispered. "They say he must burn." Shari's heart froze in her chest. Not from fear, but from fury. They would kill him not because he was weak, not because he failed, but because he had not. She told the child to go and say nothing. Then she turned and walked to the old tower where the weapons of her ancestors were kept. She opened the stone chest and took the blade of her mother, the one that never missed when thrown, the one dipped in the fire of truth. Night fell slowly, the stars hiding behind thick clouds. The moon choked in smoke. The human sat near the fire, sharpening a bone knife, his shoulders tense, his breath slow. She sat beside him without a word, the warmth between them stronger than the fire. "They're coming," he said quietly. "I know," she answered. He looked at her, not surprised, not afraid, just calm. "I'll leave," he said, "if it keeps you safe." She turned to him with eyes like burning ice. "If you run now, you'll never stop running," she said. "And I won't follow cowards." He nodded once and said nothing more. In the dead of night, fire bloomed at the edge of the village, not from wind or accident, but from torches, dozens of them, held by figures with covered faces and sharp blades. Shari stood between the fire and the human, her own blade raised, her feet rooted in stone. The leader stepped forward, his voice twisted with fear and hate. "He does not belong," he said. "He has brought death, he will bring more." Shari's voice cut through the smoke like a blade. "He brought strength," she said. "He brought truth. The villagers surrounded them slowly, blades drawn, faces twisted with the madness that only fear brings. Then one threw a torch. It landed near the human's feet and flames leapt like a snake. He kicked it aside, but 3 more followed. Fire spreading across the ground, Shari moved fast, cutting through the first attacker before his blade could rise. Her strikes clean and deadly, her eyes cold and silent. The human fought beside her, his movements less graceful but brutal and wild. Each swing of his bone knife leaving someone broken. They moved like one, back to back, their breath in sync, their fury shared. The fire spread fast, licking the walls, climbing the huts, turning the village into a burning ring. One of the elders stepped forward, his hand raised. "Enough," he shouted. "This is not the way." But no one listened. Fear had drowned reason, and fire had swallowed mercy. Shari's blade flashed again, cutting a path through the chaos. Her heart breaking with every step, not from guilt, but from betrayal. These were her people, her blood, her home, and they had turned to ash before her eyes. A spear flew through the smoke, aimed at the human's back. She saw it too late, but he turned just in time and caught it in his side instead of his heart. He fell to one knee, blood pouring from the wound, and Shari screamed, not in fear, but in fury. She leapt over him, her blade spinning, her body a storm, and in moments, silence returned. The attackers lay still, the flames now dying down as the wind shifted. Shari knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she pressed cloth to his wound. He looked at her, pale and tired, but still smiling. "You fight better angry," he said. She didn't answer, just held him close. The heat of fire replaced by the heat of rage and fear, and something else she didn't want to name yet. The elders came forward again, this time with no weapons, their faces covered in ash and shame. "You cannot stay here," one of them said. Shari stood slowly, her blade still in her hand, her voice steady. "We were never staying," she said. "Not anymore." She helped the human to his feet, wrapping his arm around her shoulder. Together, they walked through the smoke, past the broken walls, past the twisted silence, and into the cold wild beyond. The village faded behind them, swallowed by its own fear. But the path ahead burned bright, not with fire, but with purpose, because what they had now was more than survival. It was trust, and trust, once broken, never returned the same. But when forged in fire, it became something sharper than any blade, something stronger than any storm, and something the world would learn to fear. The wind howled across the cliffs like a wounded beast, sharp and endless, tearing through the rocks with icy fingers. Shari pulled her fur cloak tighter around the human's shoulders as they climbed higher into the frozen peaks. Their footprints, already erased by the snow behind them, each breath came with pain now, cold air slicing their lungs like glass. But they didn't stop. They couldn't stop. Behind them lay the village in ruins, a fire that no longer burned, and ahead of them waited nothing but frost, silence, and the unknown. The human limped beside her, blood from his wounds soaked into the cloth at his waist, his face pale but his jaw tight with grit and stubborn will. Shari didn't speak, but her eyes flicked to him every few steps, measuring his strength, counting the seconds between each stagger. He was slower than before, but not broken, not yet. They reached a narrow pass just as the sky turned gray, snow beginning to fall in thick, slow flakes, each one landing like a warning. She led him to a shallow cave just under a ledge of black ice, the mouth hidden behind sharp stone teeth, a place forgotten even by the wild. Inside, the wind was muffled, the stone walls cold but still, and for the first time in days, They sat without weapons drawn. Shari knelt beside him and checked his wound again, peeling back the soaked cloth. The gash deep but clean. She pressed fresh herbs against it, one she had stolen from the old village stores. Mixed with spit and powdered bone, the human winced, but didn't cry out, his hands gripping his knees as the pain burned through him. "You should have let me go alone," he said, voice raw. She looked up at him, her eyes fierce like winter flame. "If you were alone, you'd be dead," she replied. "And I don't bury what I respect." He smiled weakly, then coughed, his breath misting in the air. Outside, the snow thickened, falling like a blanket meant to smother the world. The cave shook once as a distant roar echoed across the peaks. Not thunder, not wind, something heavier, older. Shari's head turned sharply, her muscles tightening. "What was that?" the human asked, his fingers reaching for the knife at his side. She didn't answer, not yet. Instead, she stood and moved to the cave's entrance, her eyes scanning the white wall of storm beyond. The sound came again, lower this time, closer, like a heartbeat rising from beneath the mountain. She returned to him and crouched low, her voice a whisper now. "There are things here," she said, "frozen things that wake only when blood enters the snow." He nodded slowly, not with understanding, but with trust. They built a small fire in the corner of the cave, using dry moss and broken roots. The flame weak but warm enough to hold back the dark. Shari sat across from him, sharpening her blade in slow, careful strokes. The human watched the flame dance, his eyes unfocused, lost in the crackle of fire and the silence between each spark. "You weren't afraid," he said suddenly. "When they turned on us." She paused, blade halfway down the stone. "I was," she said, "but I was more afraid of letting them decide what we were." The fire popped once, spitting a tiny ember into the air. He leaned back against the cave wall, exhaling slowly. "I thought I was ready to die," he said. "Back in the village." She stared at him through the flickering light. "But you didn't," she said, "because something stronger than fear was still inside you." He looked at her now, really looked, like the snow had melted between them. "What's inside you?" he asked, not with challenge, but curiosity. She answered without pause. "Rage." The wind outside howled louder, snow swirling past the cave mouth like spirits looking for warmth. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled. Light at first, then stronger, like something massive shifting below the ice. Shari jumped to her feet, her blade drawn, her breath steaming. The human stood too, though slower, gripping the wall for balance. A crack echoed across the pass, followed by a sound like bones breaking underwater. From the snow beyond the cave came shapes, tall and thin, bodies made of frost and ash, eyes glowing dim blue beneath cracked masks of ice. Shari grabbed the torch from the fire, the flame flaring higher as it tasted air. "They are the forgotten," she said, "warriors who never left this place." The creatures moved slowly, soundlessly, their feet not touching the snow, their limbs stiff but powerful. The human stepped beside her, his knife ready, even with blood still dripping from his wound. "They see us," he said quietly. Shari nodded. "They smell us," she corrected, "and they will not stop unless we remind them what death feels like." The first creature lunged forward, blade of black ice swinging through the storm. Shari met it midair, her torch searing across its chest, the fire screaming as it touched the frozen skin. It shrieked, not with a voice, but with the sound of ice cracking on fire. The human followed with a sharp strike to its knee, breaking the leg clean, the creature toppling like a tree. But more came, 3, then 6, then a dozen, rising from the snow like memories. They fought as the cave shook, as the fire flickered. As the snowstorm closed in around them, Shari moved like she always had, a storm wrapped in skin, her blade carving heat through cold. The human fought beside her, slower now, wounded but wild. His breath loud, his strikes desperate but sure. Finally the last creature fell, its body turning to dust in the wind. The snow stopped, the silence returned, and the fire burned low again. They stood in the cave, breathing hard, blood mixing with melted ice at their feet. He looked at her, then at the empty snow outside. "Still think rage is enough?" he asked. She walked past him, dropped her blade into the fire, the metal hissing as it steamed. "No," she said. "Now I think rage needs a reason." And in that cold silence, they both knew the reason had already begun. It wasn't survival anymore. It was something more dangerous. It was revenge. The mountain cracked beneath their feet as the sun began to rise behind the frozen peaks. Its light weak and cold, but enough to reveal what waited ahead. A fortress built into the stone itself stood at the edge of the world, black and ancient, with spires made from the ribs of a creature so massive even the sky bent around its bones. Shari had heard stories of this place, whispered in fear and silence, a forgotten stronghold where the first Deathworlders had buried their dead. And sometimes, their secrets. The human walked beside her, his steps slower but steady, his wounds wrapped in thick layers of cloth and frost, his knife still tied to his belt, though dulled by the blood of frozen beasts. They had crossed fire and storm and betrayal to reach this place, but the path was not yet finished. A figure stood at the entrance of the fortress, tall and wrapped in robes of ice and chain, its face hidden behind a mask shaped like a snarling beast, its hands empty but heavy with power. Shari stepped forward, her blade in hand, her eyes locked on the figure. "You guard what should be free," she said, "and we have come to break that chain." The figure didn't move, but the ground trembled beneath its feet, and a voice echoed from behind the mask. "You bring an outsider to the gate of the old ones." It said, "You mock the blood that made you." Shari didn't blink. "I bring someone who stood when others ran," she said. "Someone who bled for truth, not fear." The figure stepped aside, not in welcome but in warning. "Then step through and claim what waits," it said. "But know this, only one may leave alive." The gates opened with a groan like mountains dying, stone grinding against bone, darkness spilling out like ink. Inside, the fortress breathed, each corridor pulsing like veins, each chamber filled with the echoes of those who had screamed long before. They walked through halls carved with battle, walls etched with names lost to time, some still stained with old blood that refused to fade. At the heart of the fortress lay a chamber wrapped in firelight, but there was no fire, only heat rising. From the ground in the presence of something watching, a throne sat at the center, built from blades and claws, and on it rested a beast unlike any they had seen before. Its skin was black stone, its breath like steam, its eyes wide and glowing like twin suns swallowed in shadow. It stood slowly, towering above them both, muscles stretching beneath ancient armor, its roar shaking the very air. Shari raised her blade, and the human raised his fist. No words passed between them. They knew this was the final test, the final roar that would decide everything. The beast charged like thunder, each step cracking the ground, its claws ripping through air like blades of wind. Shari dodged left, her blade slicing across its leg. The cut shallow but enough to make it turn. The human rolled under its arm, stabbing deep into its side. the knife snapping but leaving a wound that hissed and smoked. The beast roared again, spinning fast, its tail crashing into Shari's chest, sending her flying into the wall. She gasped, blood in her mouth. Ribs shattered, vision shaking, but she stood. Her knees trembling but her grip still firm. The human leapt onto the beast's back, wrapping his arms around its throat, digging his broken blade into soft flesh just under the jaw. The beast howled, spinning wildly, slamming into the stone, trying to shake him off. But he held on, his teeth clenched, his eyes blazing. Shari ran forward, using every last breath, every last drop of strength, and drove her blade through the beast's heart. From below, the chamber exploded in light, the beast screaming as fire and ice burst from its mouth, its body collapsing in a heap of smoke and stone. The ground shook, and for a moment, all was still. Then the silence returned, not empty, but full of something new. The human stood over the beast's body, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his arms, his face covered in ash. Shari knelt beside him, one hand gripping his shoulder. "We did it," she whispered. Not as a warrior, but as something more. The throne pulsed with light, the weapons embedded in it glowing red and gold. A voice, not spoken but felt, echoed in the chamber. "You are the last roar, the final truth, the fire born of unity." The light rose higher, filling the hall, swallowing the shadows, breaking the chains that had bound the fortress for centuries. When they stepped outside again, the sky was clear, the snow melting under their feet, the mountain no longer cold, but alive. Behind them, the fortress began to collapse, not from destruction, but from release, its purpose fulfilled, its burden lifted. Shari looked at the human, her equal, her rival, her only truth in a world full of lies. "What now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She turned her face to the rising sun, the warmth strange but welcome on her skin. "Now we return," she said, "but not to bow, not to explain, not to ask for a place." He smiled, a real one, tired but full. "We return to take it," he said. They began walking down the path. Again, the wind no longer screaming, the cold no longer biting. They had faced fire, betrayal, storm, trial and beast, and they had not just survived. They had become legend, not just in name, not just in blood, but in roar, the last roar, the one. The stars would remember, forever,